Are we all here? It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to something called the Great Stone Tour. I don't like that name. I'll explain why when we get there. My name is Batu Davis. I do like that name, so I'll keep it. We're going to be together for about an hour. I'm going to bring you back to the lobby. Anybody at the end of the tour who wants to go out into the Muslim quarter will be free to do that. I just have a bum ankle, and it's flatter coming back inside, so I'm making that choice simply for my own comfort. I hope that's all right with everyone. If you've got cameras, please feel free to use them. We'd like you to remember as much as you can. So, have you seen this building outside? Does anybody know what it's called? The Dome of the Rock. It is on the Temple Mount. You're exactly right. What would you expect to find under a building called the Dome of the Rock?
A rock.
A rock. That's Sakra. That's Arabic. Evan Hashasiyah. That's Hebrew. And if you read the Bible in plain English, you might have seen it called Mount Moriah. Ah, Mount Moriah. You mean that place that God told Abraham to go and showed him with a cloud? The original ways. Yes, exactly. And how long ago did that happen? About 4,000 years ago. The first Jew comes to what will become the heart of Jerusalem. 4,000 years ago, that's Abraham and Isaac, Yitzhak. And let's fast forward about 1,000 years. Now, we have David and Solomon. Please don't let me forget this, but I put it down here for a reason. Why did David? He conquered a small village of Jebusites, and then he continues to build his palace right down here. How come here? Why not up on top of the mountain?
That's where the water is.
The Gihon Spring. Exactly. The Gihon Spring is right here. That is the only source of water for Jerusalem. Very important city, spiritually, on the edge of the desert. David's son comes back up the hill. After a certain amount of searching around, they find where that original spot was, the altar built by Abraham, and Solomon builds the first temple right here. Right, Rishon built here by Shlomo HaMelech. Now that building stands for 410 years. That building has 10 miracles. That building attracts people to it from all around the world. Until, after standing for 410 years, the Babylonians come. And they're not interested in miracles, they're interested in destruction. They destroy it and kick us out into exile. So there we sit, on the shores of the rivers of Babylon, hanging up our harps, not wanting to sing. And, question, was this good for the Jews or bad for the Jews? Actually, it was very good for the Jews. It got us out of the hot spot that seems to attract a lot of attention, settled us over here by a nice fertile land. Yeshivas were built, and the Babylonian Talmud was built. We were there for 1,000 years. However, after coming here, about 70 years later, something interesting happens. Rulership changes hands. We now have an emperor named Cyrus. Cyrus conquers all the countries in the area. And then he says, now, go back home and rebuild your temples, rebuild your national cultures, rebuild your national language. Just remember, when it comes time to pay taxes, pay up on time and we'll stay friends. an ancient federation of nations. It sounds very modern, and you can read all about it on the Cyrus cylinder the next time you visit Tehran. Meanwhile, 42,000 Jews come back home. That's not very many. I guess life was too good in Babylonia. The pizza must have been great. At any rate, 42,000 of us come back under some prophets. Zerubbabel, Ezra, Nehemiah. If you say Nehemiah, we say Nehemiah. Which you can too, after eating a bit more hummus, get a little bit stuck in your throat. Nehemiah, Nehemiah. You'll get it just like that. Okay. Second temple gets built, but it's kind of small. Some real important things happen on Shekinah All that time moves on, about 300 years. Someone comes along, looks at that small temple and says, "Ha! You call that a temple? I'll show you how to build." And I would imagine that most of you know who I'm talking about. King Herod, the great builder, is not going to rebuild a small little holy area like Solomon had built. He's going to start by making the whole thing a lot bigger. The stonemasons get busy and chop the top off this limestone mountain. Now they know what Herod's going to do. So they don't just create a pile of gravel, they carve this rock into voicers. Excuse me? Voicers. They're going to make a big vault. Now what's a voicer? It is not a rectangular rock. It is a rock that is smaller on the inside and bigger on the outside. Then you build some sort of support and you start putting these voicers in place, up, until finally the last voicer row, the keystone row, goes in place, and because they're all leaning on each other, they hold each other up. That's a really good method of building because that's been standing for 2,000 years. Eskimos do the same thing. We do the same thing when they build an igloo. They just go around a circle and do it. Voicers, vaults, one of the strongest forms of construction ever come up with. We're not going to get into geodesic domes. Okay, at any rate, so these stonemasons are now going to build two vaults because the Temple Mount is built on a hill that's disappearing to the south. These two vaults are going to support the southern end of the largest Temple Mount in the Roman Empire. This is the Temple Mount of today, still, which is 144,000 square meters. That's pretty big. That's a lot of football fields. And the western wall itself is 488 meters long. A meter's about a yard. And the western wall outside, by the western wall plaza, that you all just saw, is right here. That's only about 70 meters of this entire length. On top of this, Herod builds his magnum opus, which was the Second Temple. And no miracles, but a stunningly beautiful building. Everybody has slightly different ideas of exactly what it looked like. With the measurements we know. Herod built that? Now, remember, a smaller building had been here first. Did he repair or knock down and rebuild? I would vote for that because he was such a good builder, he wouldn't want to build on anybody else's mistakes. This building is 100 meters tall. This building attracted people from all over around the world because of its beauty. This building stood for less than 100 years, making the Second Temple period 420 years long, and it was destroyed by the Romans. That was around 70 of the Common Era. I'm sorry for being so hedgy, around, about, approximately. I have to use those words because that's the truth. We don't really know. Even the 70 years is contested. Some say 68. So, I'm not going to go there. I'm just providing you with the most common, academically accepted archaeological opinion. But I still have to say, approximately maybe. Okay? Everybody's with me on that? So, time passes. About 600 years. And then, in 691, Abd-el-Melech Ibn el-Marwan, the Caliph from Damascus, builds the Dome of the Rock on the site that in the Islamic tradition is where Muhammad went up to heaven to get the command to pray 5 times a day. Interestingly enough, in the Islamic tradition, meeting Moses on the way. Fascinating how everyone is all mixed up with each other over this spot. Kind of points to its highly likely significance. Once the Muslims were here, we became Dahimi, second-class citizens. That's all right. We can live under the radar until a horrible Friday in 1099. The wolf was at the gate, and he was wearing Crusader clothing. The Crusaders were equal opportunity murderers, and it was off with their heads, all of them. Every Muslim, every Jew, dead, gone. After 12 hours of very enthusiastic ethnic cleansing, no one was left alive to help the poor Crusaders figure out how to make hummus. You think I'm being a bit hard on the Crusaders? Catch up on your history. I got a fun way for you to do that. Whip out that little electronic communication thing you got in your pockets. Do a Google on YouTube, Crusaders, Terry Jones. Terry Jones is the important part of that, because he's going to give you 4 delightful hours. Why delightful? Well, he's part of a group called Monty Python, so I think you'll enjoy yourselves. Now, once you understand about the Crusaders, you'll understand why the Muslims tolerated their presence for 97 years, and then put up somebody named Salah ad-Din. Salah ad-Din was the right man for the right job. And he basically said, "Out!" The problem was, Crusaders didn't quite get it, and they kept trying to come back. So, a few years later, about 300, another group of Muslims comes galloping in, and they say, "We're going to solve the problem." Up till that point, there were only 2 gateways onto the Temple Mount. You couldn't protect it so easily. These Muslims, called the Mamelukes, filled the entire Tyropoeon Valley with vaults. Like this. Fill the Tyropoeon Valley with vaults, build your buildings up on top, build them onto the western wall, cover everything up, and that is the basis of the Muslim quarter of today, which is built on 700-year-old vaults, built 700 years ago by the Mamelukes. Now, look at the western wall. Now you see it, and now you don't. That's what happened to most of it. This is the western wall Prayer Plaza outside. This is all covered up, and our tour is going to take us along the wall so we can see it, because after 1967 we're going to find out if it was all still there, which it is. So, that's the basic background. Are there any questions? I know it's too much information, way too much. Questions, clarification? Going once? Going twice? Don't be shy.
If you have a suggestion for a new cruise, I mentioned cruise many times.
Almost Abu Bush. Yes. There's something called masafacha. I'm not sure how to say it. It is hummus mixed with tahina. Some good restaurants, and it has whole chickpeas in it, will serve that to you hot. That's the best. Oh. I'm going to eat that because I already told you that's There's some really good hummus places in the shuk also. Okay, anybody else? Abu Kamal in the Old City, the Christian Quarter, if you're not worried about kashrut, it's supposed to be the best. I can't vouch for that personally, but that's my part. Any other questions? Okay, if not, off we go. Wrong picture. Okay. I invite you.
Thank you.
Esa montaña que ves que se salió
Sí.
muchos años después se logra para levantar el templo, porque llegamos con 300.000 judíos. Hoy en día mucho más. Claro, es una segunda plancha del fútbol.
Sí, en realidad es perfecto.
Son 450 por 250.
Impresionante.
Segundo mundo. Entonces, nosotros vamos a caminar 300 metros. Ahora,
Arriba de la casa de Ishmael. Va por abajo de la
ellos
casa.
hicieron arcos
Sí.
para estar cerca del monte de Fuego.
Sí, ahí
Por
se
afuera, ahora vas a ver el lugar más cerca. Solo 2 semanas. En una época eran 2 semanas por año, ahora van a hay más cuadritos por todo seguro. Así que no cierres la tiendita.
Inmobiliario. Thank you for translating. My Spanish does not exist.
No?
No. Or is it Portuguese? Spanish? Spanish. Okay. You might wonder, how do you find a place like this? You might like to hear about some of the people who've been here. Well, first of all, this is the room that emphasizes the people who help us make this all possible. These are our donors. We are not running on any government money right now. That's all been taken away for obvious reasons. And it's the donors that keep us digging, which is not going on at exactly the same rate as before because people are busy doing right now. But thank you all. Thank you for keeping the faith and showing the faith and support for Israel by bothering to come here during this time. We really appreciate it. Now, I understand that some of you are from London. We're going to talk about the British. Why are we going to talk about the British? Well, because above your heads is a bridge that was built in the Second Temple period. Now, we were standing under a vault. We passed several more vaults. We're standing under another vault. Actually, we are under the structure right here, which is not just a bridge, it's a bridge aqueduct taking water onto the Temple Mount. I'm not letting you look at the picture very carefully because it's up onto the Temple Mount, and then you're going to wonder, does indeed water flow uphill in Jerusalem? No, it's a bad picture, so that is why I'm not letting you look at it very much. Now, that aqueduct would have been a channel built on the southern side of this bridge, heading towards the Temple Mount, which is in that direction. The water is coming from about 20 kilometers south of here, under Gush Etzion, just a bit south of Bethlehem. This water went through an aqueduct. It goes around all the hills between here and there, over little bridges over valleys, and in 3 places they actually chiseled tunnels through the mountains. An incredible job of building, most likely done in the time of King Alexander Yanai, about 2,100 and some years ago. That aqueduct was so well built, it carried water for everyone who was in Jerusalem all the way up to the time of the British in 1930, and that brings us to the British. The British didn't just come in 1930, they were actually here much earlier. They sent a group called the Palestine Exploration Force in 1867, and this was headed by an interesting young man named Charles Warren. Charles Warren was a religious man. He required all the people who worked with him to learn Psalm 15. Bother to look up Psalm 15. You can find it on your little handheld device there real easy. It's short, and it will let you know something about what was important to Charles Warren. It would be a wonderful world if the entire world memorized this song. You'll enjoy it. So, Charles Warren comes here, and he's an engineer. He likes to dig. And he realizes there's a lot of really old stones around here, and he starts digging. Now, he's meant to explore, but he really goes for it. And he's digging, and he's drawing really accurate maps that we still use today, and he is getting onto the radar of who's in charge in 1867? The Ottoman Empire. Now, the Ottomans had been allies with the British a bit earlier, some more, never mind, too much information. And they were looking at this young man, and they were thinking, they weren't sure if they were still friendly with the British or not. They were kind of moving more towards the Germans. And they were looking at this young man and all those maps he was drawing and all that digging he was doing, and they were thinking, you know, this guy might just be a spy. What do you do with the spy? Yeah, what happens if you're still allies? This is a touchy situation. So they did a really good solution. They found themselves a huge rock, a boulder, big, heavy, and they several people schlepped it over and they put it blocking his exit. Now, it looked like they were just doing some landscaping, but let's supposed to happen next is he's going to turn into a bag of bones and we'll be finished with our problem. 27-year-old man who has dug from one side of the Rock of Gibraltar to the other and back again. What's he really going to do? Well, I'm not so sure now, is it? Did he get away with it or did he not? Do you really want to find out or do you not? Come, let's explore. So there you have it. We have started under this vault, passed by these vaults, walked under these vaults, and we are standing under the last double vaults of our bridge aqueduct. My hands are resting on this last pier that supports the last huge vault of this bridge aqueduct that attaches the whole thing to the Temple Mount to the western wall. 2,000-year-old vault. The original part of the bridge, which is about 2,100 years old, is in that room. You see, what happened is the same thing that happens today. They built the bridge with the aqueduct, and then for some reason decided to make it wider, just like we do. This was built probably right before the destruction of the base of Migdosh, sometime around the 70th of the Common Era. Now, Charles Warren was in this area, right here, when he heard that big boulder being fit into his exit, and he knew that he and his two friends couldn't move it. Well, that whole area is sealed off. The blocked exit's around the corner. This wall goes down to the floor. Warren and his friends pull those 2 blocks out of the wall. Now there is an old building right to the left of the main square section. This is a monolith building, it's 700 years old. Warren knew it was there. It's a court of Sharia law, and he hoped if he pulled those 2 blocks out, they would lead to the west end of the building. And he could shimmy through there, hit the ground, and run for it. Unfortunately, they were right in the middle of that court of Sharia law, and that was not a good place for him to show his face. How to get out of here?
He waited till it was night.
No, much more safe than that. The answer is quite obvious, and nobody ever gets it because you're all busy looking at my face instead of looking around. Not there, not there, not there, not there, not. Thank you, sir. Out through the door we just came in through. Well done. Okay, so that was filled up with stones and dirt. But he could dig. He could dig through stones and dirt. So we and his friends took him about 12 hours, but they dug out the way we just came in. So they were crawling out, and they got out of here through the entrance way that you just came in. So he did make his way out of here. He lived to be 97, and I've had the pleasure of guiding some of his kids, grandkids, on this tour. Does anybody have any questions? If you want to read more about Charles Warren, his book, Underground Jerusalem, is a free PDF file, all 600 pages of it. Online, you can get it, download it, and read it. It's that great story. Nobody reads it, but I don't. Okay, anybody questions or anything here? Okay. You're welcome. We got switched to Davis at Ellis Island, so there's some serious consequences. Thank you. they threw rocks into cement. Now, 97% of what you are going to see today is original. The cement is not. Because cement dissolves. Even once it's set, if it has water constantly dripping through it, it will dissolve. So we had to replace the cement. And every now and then we added some grommets and some rods and some other steel bits and pieces to keep things in place, to keep you safe, and to keep the Muslim quarter above our heads. These four walls built by the monoliths are supporting an Islamic religious school. Which might make you wonder, why did you build a synagogue under an Islamic religious school? Part of the answer is because this makes a beautiful ceiling. You don't find other vaults down here that are quite so magnificent. Despite the fact that we're basically standing in the dungeon that was under the building, it is beautiful, especially to modern eyes that aren't used to seeing it. And before we go find out exactly why here, the level that I'm standing on, if I were to go through those ground doors, I'd be in the men's indoor prayer area. Keep going, and I'd be outside on the Western Wall Prayer Plaza. So this is the level of the Western Wall Prayer Plaza by the hotel. That is not the bottom of the hotel. There's about 17 more rows that go down. We are not at the bottom of the hotel. So, are there any questions here before we leave Shara Chuba? So let's go see exactly why we decided to build this synagogue. Shara Chuba is based on the name of the man who built it. It's Chuba, who was in the timeline. It's been drilling under the ocean without a lot of it.
Eso me dijo que no es tecnológico, como América Pescador.
Wow.
Acá te sale.
No, si sos donante o si sos...
Por eso, porque hace mucha vez. Digo, son mucho.
O te tienes que tener un favor grande por otra guita que diste.
No, se pasaron trueque.
Eso que le diste $100.000 a la Gaza.
Sí.
Presidente de la Gaza.
We are basically a bit north of our bridge. I'm standing over here since we're working over there, and I do not want to get too close to them to make them nervous. But we have to do a lot of work in here because we are dealing with very old stones, and those stones have to be constantly monitored. We are getting very close to a place that is opposite where the base of Migdash, where the temple was stood. And we are facing the Western Wall, which is one of the main reasons why we built the synagogue here. It's facing the Western Wall, and it's very close. It is opposite where the temple Now, as we look at the wall, we are looking at something called big stone. And that is this stone right here. Disappears off the edge and disappears off the edge. We're going to walk more. And I'm going to walk out of my hand another stone that's almost as long. 45 feet long. 12 feet tall and about 11 feet thick. Equals one big block of limestone that weighs about 200 metric tons. How did they get it here? Well, nobody wrote that down, so I can't tell you because I don't know. And that's why I don't like the name. First of all, this is the Western Wall. You did not come to see a big stone. There are big stones here and there. It's pretty amazing. But you really came to see the Western Wall. So I don't like emphasizing that stone. I also don't like it because I can't tell you how to learn it. I still like to say I don't know. But let's change your question into why did they bother to put it there? That's a question I can answer. Because in 1033, there was a huge earthquake. And there are 4 big stones in a row. And north of here, no big stones, and guess what happened to the wall? It got knocked down. These stones placed somewhere near the middle of the wall because of their massive weight, are stabilizing the wall below. Didn't stabilize the wall above. That, if you look, was rebuilt with much smaller stones. You see that? When you're outside, the bottom 7 rows of stone look like this, sort of. They've been badly damaged. But then on top, we have stones that look like that. Wait a minute. Look at that. There's one of those Herodian borders. Now, what's that doing up there? How come that stone doesn't look like these stones? Because the Roman legionnaires, once they destroyed the temple, were told to knock down the entire Temple Mount. Oh, there's a piece of it. You're right. They were pretty successful at first until they got down to this massive rock. And then they got out their chisels and they're actually trying to chisel this thing off the wall. Used to go up to there. They got much of it off, but the commander ran out of patience, shortened them all by about this much, and that big block and its neighbors basically have saved the wall below for your visit in 2024. Questions? Okay, so we're going to move on. Now remember, I'm walking out another block that's almost as big. Please watch this because they're setting up the thing. Why do people come to pray by the western wall? When the Beis Hamikdash, when the temple was destroyed, something called the divine presence. We're talking metaphysical things, I can't really define what that means. But the divine presence escaped to the west, and according to even Shlomo HaMelech, settled on this western wall. That was a prophecy Shlomo HaMelech made. Settled on the western wall, and people feel that this is a very, very special place where one can connect and pray, daven, and definitely be answered. We're looking at what might very well be the bottom of the western wall. Now, this is still part of the wall that was knocked down by that big earthquake in 1033. And when the Muslims built the Dome of the Rock, they had to rebuild the wall. So the top part of the wall was rebuilt by the Muslims, also children of Abraham. Now, in 1948, something happened. The little old man gets up and tells Aviv, it says, and the name of our state is Israel. And Israel is declared a state, and the next day we are attacked by the 5 surrounding countries, make it 6 or 7, a little bit of help from their friends. And the chances of our winning this war was 1 big fat 0. Ben Gurion did something quite right to stack the cards in our favor. That is summarized very nicely for you in a movie from the 60s that you can still get online. It's about $3, called Cast a Giant Shadow. I strongly recommend this. will give you a very good idea of something that had to happen in the beginning of our country's history. We won the war with that help, but we lost access to the old city. From 1948 to 1967, there were no Jews. In fact, there were very few people defended by the Western Wall. Then in 1967, something happened. Now, we were looking at our borders, and there was a lot of armaments being gathered on our borders, and we decided, well, there was this general in the Air Force, and he had been thinking about this idea, and he said, I know what we can do. I know how we can wipe out the Egyptian Air Force. Here's my plan. And they were actually working on this for a couple of years. Monday morning, June 5th, they start putting his plan into effect. A group of planes takes off from Ben Gurion. Another group takes off. Another group takes off. Some are going this way, some are going that way, some this way, some that way. They're all eventually heading towards Egyptian airfields. Within an hour, we have wiped out the entire Egyptian Air Force, turn around, come back, refuel, and head north and east, and give some other friends of ours little taste of their own medicines. Wow! No. Now, what is this? These pilots, anybody a pilot? These pilots were flying under the radar. Do you know what that means? You're in a Mirage jet, you're going 600 miles an hour, you're 100 feet above the ground. Aren't there buildings that are that tall? Yep, and for sure, mountains. Whew. That's how we got undetected. Wait a minute, wait. Let me tell you what really happened. There was a Jewish cadet in West Point. West Point is a fancy schmancy American military academy, kind of like Oxford, but it's for the military. Jews don't get accepted there, but this Jewish kid got himself accepted as a cadet. That's rare. This Jewish kid asked a question because Jewish kids ask questions. That's what we do. They're in a class on military strategy. He asked the professor, Sir, how come we never study Israeli military strategy? And the general says, Cadet, see me after class. Cadet knocks on the door. He's kind of scared. He doesn't want to get kicked out. He thought it was a legit question. The general says, sit down. You're a Jew, right? The kid says, well, yes, you know that, sir. Yes, sir. And the general says, be proud of it. And the kid's like, okay. And then the general says, we asked your question. How they win the 48 war, how they win 56, the Sinai campaign, how they stay aboard in 67, 73, they just about lost. And you know what? After studying all of the so-called strategy, we realized, man, if we tried any of these strategies, it would be a suicide mission. You guys have somebody who is pulling you back from the brink and pulling you through the Red Sea, just like that. Whew. The kid said, wow. Now that kid happens to live in my neighborhood now. He's pretty religious. He's got one of these big fur hats and 12 kids of his own. So, that is a true story, and that lets you know that, well, what just happened in Iran with the president of Iran who was supposed to hang that Jewish boy. Check out the news. It is quite amazing. You know, his helicopter just flew to the side of the mountain. The other two helicopters got on the same. Whew, okay. Are there any questions here? Now that we've gotten back to the Western Wall in 1967, we began digging. Palestinians worked with us because they find lots of things their ancestors left behind here. And we dug and got to this point where we dug the Western Wall tunnel. This is the tunnel. It's a short bit of our entire tour under the Muslim quarter. As we go in here with the last one, will you please shut the door behind you? Don't worry. I know. No.
you.
Yeah.
You mentioned Tyropian Valley. I was wondering, we heard from our guide, Kidron Valley, Gehenna Valley. Where this Tyropian, where does it fit?
Okay, the Tyropian Valley today comes in through Damascus Gate.
Okay.
Did you go through Damascus Gate?
Yes, yes.
Did you notice that it was kind of in a valley?
Yeah, yeah.
You had to go down a lot of
Yeah, down,
steps to
yeah.
get through that gate?
Yes.
Well, that's part of the beginning of the Tyropian Valley. Then it continues right here. This is it. And it actually swings under the southwest corner of the Temple Mount and continues on down. The Kidron Valley is over here on that side. Okay? Okay? So we probably didn't talk about it. It's not so obvious. You probably came to the Western Wall on top of a street called El Wad Street, which means the Valley Street. So that main access between the Western Wall and Damascus Gate is actually right on top of the Tyropian Valley. So way above the ground, lots of fill dirt. Yeah, it's very hard to see. London is a city built by a river. It's flat. Yeah, you have little hills there, but you've got the Thames, and London's basically built, if you don't know, on a floodplain of the Thames. Thames guards keep the North Sea from coming in and flooding things. It's pretty flat. I mean, not flat. But here, we're built in the Milky Way. Not obvious. And in fact, when you open up the Bible and you talk about Abraham coming down from Haran, you talk about Abraham heading south. Well, the way to come into this country is through that valley and then down this valley, and he's got to get to Shechem. Now we're going to go up that valley. So I can stand in a place and say, see those really funny looking hills? Abraham probably saw those. And be pretty spot right on. Possibly more so than with the archaeology. Because that's the only logical way to go. And when you're coming by camel, you come the logical way. So it's a different reality. I remember being at the Tower of London, and the guy was showing us all these pots they pulled out of the Thames and other places, and the pots were all whole. And I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I was going to my husband like, the pots are all whole. And the guy goes like, yeah, we pull out whole pots. I said, we don't find any whole pots in Jerusalem. They've all been destroyed. Things have been collapsed on. You never find a whole pot here. Okay. My friends, we have gotten to the end of a street built in the Second Temple period. You're standing on a street built in the Second Temple period. Yep, those tiles are 2,000 years old. We are also standing in the bedrock. How does that work? Well, let's say you want to build the Temple Mount 2,000 years ago. You want to get that contract. You make a nice, big, beautiful plan, but you forget you're building on the side of a mountain that is rising to the north. That means the northwest corner of your Temple Mount is only going to be 3 meters tall. You could build the whole thing a lot taller. Make sure you get the contract, but the southwest corner of the Temple Mount is already 50 meters tall. You don't want to make that another 50 meters tall because we do have earthquakes, and that might be pushing it. So what you're going to do is think Israeli and do the opposite. Quarry down into the bedrock. Turn this area into a quarry, carve out building blocks, push them down the hill to build with, and drop down the level of your street. You are standing on a street that was artificially dropped down 2,000 years ago. We should be standing up there. That means that all of these rocks that look like they were put there actually carved into the wall. They carved a nice crack here. They carved a nice crack here and here. But this is bedrock. This is the real wall bumping into it. And of course, the rest of this is bedrock that they were planning on removing that they never got to. Questions? So now I'd like to show you a little video based on 12 books of architecture written by a gentleman named Vitruvius, who was a Roman architect. How did they build the wall? How did they do all their building? Stairway and turning left. When we turn left, we are leaving the western wall behind and the Temple Mount. And we are going off in a north-northwest direction in an underground aqueduct. Really good picture. Point your camera right there and you can see all the way to the end.
Excellent, thank you. It's like Hezekiah's tunnel. It's like
Ah.
Hezekiah's, but
Very
taller.
different, very different, because it was open at the top.
Oh, okay, it was open.
Are we all here? You are for the first time this entire tour underground. We are in an underground aqueduct. Once they chiseled it, this is the ground level. They put stones over the top to keep animals from falling in. This would have been outside the city. Today, we are also under the Muslim quarter. This aqueduct was chiseled down by hand, and this aqueduct reveals some of the fascinating geology of the area, which involves layers of marl, which is a type of limestone, alternating with layers of limestone. Limestone itself is like a sponge, marl is like a sheet of plastic. So, the water could trickle down, but then it's going to run along here until somewhere it comes out. Of course, in chiseling this aqueduct, they opened up all this water, which then began to run down the sides and has deposited this travertine. Travertine is limestone-rich water that is slowly trickling down a wall, slow enough that it can evaporate, leaving all the minerals of the limestone to re-solidify into stone. Travertine is much harder than limestone itself. It was one of the favorite Roman building materials, and you can see how the area could be rich in it. This travertine has been accumulating for, well, how old is this aqueduct? That's a question. Very hard to date an aqueduct. Could you date the travertine accumulation? Not very reliable, because that depends on how much rain there's been. Could you date the, could you look at how it was built and say, you know, the way they chiseled this, the way they covered it over, it reminds me of an aqueduct we dug out in Givon. Now, you can't go to Givon today for political reasons, but we know that aqueduct was from the First Temple period. Could this aqueduct be 3,000 years old? Could this travertine have been accumulating for the past 3,000 years? If you do indeed touch this, I strongly recommend that when you get out, you wash your hands, because I think there might be a bit of blue-green around here, and that's not very healthy stuff, and I really shouldn't have touched it, should I? I forgot myself a bit there. So we're in an aqueduct that could go back to the First Temple period that was discovered by our friend Charles Warren in 1867. Thanks, Charles. Let's go.
Does water still come into here?
We do our level best to keep it from.
Right.
There was a point where it was going to flood, yeah. But the next question would be, from where? Let's get the answer.
From the Shuk.
Chisel marks,
Yes.
left hand, right hand, turn around. come to the end of our tour, fish pond we put the water. There are a lot more than what you see. They've got lots of babies, and there's lots of places for the babies to hang out. So we put the fish in there. You're standing north of the Temple Mount. That rock, if you were to go all the way up to the top of this wall, you'd be in someone's shop. Up on top of the shop is his house. From his living room, you can look out onto the northern end of the Temple Mount. You see the dome of the rock from his living room. Herod knew that Jerusalem has always been invaded from the north, so Herod had his stonemasons dig a moat north of the Temple Mount to protect it. This is part of that moat, which is quite wide. This is 1/4 of this pool. The moat continues on another 3/4 of this distance. 3 times this distance, that's what he said. Okay. When Herod's stonemasons were digging this western part of the moat, they realized water was trickling in because they had cut through that ancient aqueduct, and it was still bringing water from the north, and so they built this pool to collect that water. All these ancient springs don't necessarily flow anymore because of overuse of the groundwater. Now that we've gotten a bit smarter, after the initial Zionist flush of settling the country and showing how many miracles we could create, we realize that a lot of damage has been done to nature, and we are working very strongly to try to reverse some of that damage and re-raise the level of the groundwater. So some springs are coming back to life. So Herod's stonemasons built this pool, and then about 100 years later, 130 years later, Hadrian roofs the pool with these vaults to build a Roman parade ground up on top. Hadrian thought, by putting down the Bar Kokhba revolt, that he had destroyed the Jewish nation. Hadrian was going to wipe out Jerusalem and rebuild it as a Roman city with theaters and temples and bathhouses, and then Hagia Capitolina. That lasted for a short bit of time, but eventually Jews who have never left this country did begin to come back and rebuild Jerusalem as Jerusalem. This, my friends, is the end of our tour. At this point, if anybody had plans to go out into the Muslim quarter, you go up these steps. When you get to the top of the steps, is anybody going out? Okay, do leave that part of the talk. And just follow me back to where we started from. Any last minute questions? That's how it's sitting. See, and that's something which is why that so we have advice for that. Hopefully we'll get to see that.
Si es peligroso subir al Everest.
Bless you. Bless you. This water. got splashed.
Esperemos que no. Ahora va a haber elecciones, seguramente no creo. Sí, bueno, recuerda que los arreglistas van a posibilidades de trabajar.
Thank you.
Sure.
It was a great tour.
אחורה כולם. אלו, אתה לא שומע? אחי, אתה לא שומע? לא צדיק?
הרותם
לא יודע, אני אשאל אותו.
That's it. Western Wall. Complete tour.